The scene begins with Shen being excited because he hasn't fought in a long time. He who was too eager was then reprimanded by Muchen to continue his meditation. Muchen then reports that Gina has already met the Immortal and the Cursed One, and they are currently battling at Lake Baikal. Shen is confident that the two of them can handle the situation, which earns him a punch from Muchen. Meanwhile, at Lake Baikal, Gina smiles at Fuko, who is holding Andy. Gina then runs toward Andy, shouting how long it's been since they last met. However, Andy draws his sword and strikes at Gina as she approaches. Gina protests Andy's actions, as their first reunion in 40 years ends with him striking her. Andy responds to Gina's protest but is interrupted by Fuko, who mentions that Gina was the one who captured Andy 50 years ago. Gina is puzzled by the name Andy, but eventually admits that she was the one who caught and guarded him. Fuko is surprised that Gina looks the same age as her. Gina feels flattered by Fuko's words. Andy then denies it, saying he's currently 66 years old and praises anti-aging technology. As Andy is talking, he is interrupted by an invisible hand. While raising his hand, Gina asks for clarification from Andy, saying that he has been 16 years old forever. Gina then raises Andy's sword and cuts his face. Andy, shocked, jumps back. After doing so, Gina appears pleased and attempts to kiss the cut on Andy's face, but it disappears as she approaches. Gina is disappointed and frustrated that the cut vanished. Back on Andy's side, as he regenerates his face, he mentions that something invisible sealed his mouth and he's thinking of a strategy to deal with it. Meanwhile, Gina, who is pouting, confronts Fuko, claiming that she fell in love with Andy first. Fuko is surprised to hear this and asks Gina to share the story of their meeting 50 years ago. Gina remembers Andy's words when he was imprisoned, inviting him to a rematch if he ever managed to escape. That's when Gina fell in love with Andy. However, Andy disappeared without a word for 40 years until he reappeared upon meeting Fuko. Before Gina can finish her sentence, a grenade suddenly appears in front of her and explodes. Continuing his monologue, Gina angrily expresses his desire to be the first to find Andy, but is annoyed that Shen, with his dirty hands, beat him to it. He won't forgive Shen for not informing him of Andy's discovery. However, he's thankful that Shen brought Void with him, leaving an empty seat for Andy to fill. Gina, walking, was hit by a flashbang grenade right in front of her, covering both of her faces with her hands. Not wasting the opportunity, Andy then ran and attempted to strike Gina, but his attack was blocked by Gina's invisible shield. Each attack he launched couldn't penetrate Gina's shield. When Andy retreated, Gina then attacked him, which resulted in one of his legs being severed. Andy then flew backward. Fuko suggested they escape, but Andy refused as he was gathering information. After they were far enough from Gina, Andy regenerated his leg and landed in the middle of the forest. Curious about Andy's friends, Fuko asked him. Andy replied that his friends had already died and he was looking for a new place to party. Meanwhile, Gina, outside the forest, walked towards the two of them. Andy, who had prepared something, instructed Fuko to be quiet and set up horse-like traps. While setting up the traps, he provided an analysis of Gina's abilities. First, Gina condensed the lake, then lifted it using telekinesis, and she could create invisible walls and stairs. Gina, walking while twirling her beret, then slashed all the trees around her. This involved one of Andy's legs, which he then jumped into the air, bit his finger, and shot towards Gina. Smiling, Gina accepted Andy's attack using her invisible shield. Andy continued to attack while analyzing Gina's abilities. Gina was not idle. She launched an attack using her twirling beret and threw it towards Andy, who was in the air. Andy then asked Fuko to lift his leg, and in an instant Andy's body was cut in half. Seeing Gina's attack, Andy smiled. After regenerating his body parts, Andy landed and was welcomed by Gina, who was receiving her beret back. Gina had hoped that Fuko would die during her first attack. Gina continued by gripping Andy's stomach using her power. Fuko then asked Andy why he wasn't moving. Quickly, Gina replied that she was holding the lower part of Andy's body. She instructed Andy to surrender because the girl would not fulfill his desires. Before finishing his sentence, Andy yelled that no matter what happened to them later, Fuko was his. Hearing this, Fuko blushed. Andy continued that he wouldn't let her die before he did. Andy then took a grenade and held it. Gina, fueled by anger, planned to take Andy's head as she did 50 years ago. Andy then bid farewell to Fuko. He swallowed the bomb and beheaded himself with the sword he held, leaving Fuko and Gina about to swing their weapons shocked. Andy's head was thrown into the air, followed by the regeneration of his body and the swallowing of the grenade. In an instant, his body exploded, causing a rain of blood around him. Fuko and Gina remained shocked and speechless as they witnessed this. As Andy's head was thrown, he completed his analysis of Gina's powers. Seeing Andy's head in the air, Fuko ran to catch it. With Andy's blood, they could discern Gina's ability, which is called Unchanged. Fuko managed to catch Andy's head and fell. Jenna confirmed Andy's analysis and then inquired about what Andy was doing with his immortal body. While regenerating his body parts, Andy responded that at least he wasn't alone. Andy then asked for Fuko's assistance, with her on his back. With Fuko's chest touching Andy's back, she asked how long they would be in that position. Seeing Fuko's chest touching Andy's back made Jenna stammer as she reprimanded Fuko. Jenna then concluded why Andy let a weak girl, Fuko, be by his side, as Fuko seduced Andy with her chest. Fuko was surprised and couldn't explain the situation. Jenna then claimed that it would loosen and she would win. Jenna puffed up her chest and proudly declared that she wouldn't change. However, Andy contradicted her because Jenna was a self-targeter. Self-targeters were divided into two categories: self-targeter, which means they could use their powers on themselves, and external targeter, affecting others besides themselves. Jenna confessed that she was a self-targeter as proof of her immortal body. Andy explained that Gina's body only used makeup and her chest remained unchanged. Gina, hearing Andy's words, became emotional and swung her weapon. Seeing this, Andy jumped, but Gina's attack hit both of his legs and he continued flying into the sky. Andy continued to provoke Gina while avoiding her attacks. Gina, feeling irritated, kept attacking and shouted for them to come down. Andy, who kept flying while thinking about how to defeat Gina, was interrupted when Fuko addressed him, causing her to move to the front of Andy's body. Fuko mentioned that Gina had an invulnerable barrier, but she was pursuing them not by running but by walking briskly. Andy then smiled and praised Fuko while pressing his face against Fuko's chest. As he floated and found a way to defeat Gina, Andy bumped into something, causing them to fall into the floating lake. Andy fell, suspecting someone was lurking above, and Jenna continued by telling him not to interfere with her investigation. Suddenly, a light illuminated from above Andy and Fuko, startling them. The object then fired lasers at them. Andy skillfully dodged the lasers, but one laser hit Andy's vital point. Jenna then explained that she was there to investigate the presence of a suspected UMA hiding in the area. She shouted to finish this, and a saucer-shaped craft appeared right above them. Jenna mentioned Fuko's fondness for change, but she didn't like it. She just wanted to go back to the way things were with the person she loved. As she approached Andy and Fuko, she twirled her barrette again, saying that no matter how much she hurt someone, she would stay in the organization so she could keep pursuing them. She continued that the most significant change for someone is death, and if you want to make a change, do it yourself. Jenna then ran and attacked Andy with her weapon. Andy, seeing this, quickly blocked the attack with his sword, creating an incredible shockwave. Jenna kept attacking while raising her stance, and her attack hit Andy's head. While defending, Andy agreed with Gina's opinion. He then cut one of his legs and sprayed his blood toward Gina, saying that death was his, not Fuko's. Andy was pushed back as he regenerated his leg, then landed and stopped, saying that he would ensure Fuko stayed alive. He would change her heart and make a deal so that Andy would change his death. Gina praised Andy's optimism, but joining the organization was a painful and empty ordeal, and Fuko wouldn't last long. Andy, realizing something, then whispered to Fuko. Jenna then unleashed her powers to attack Andy and Fuko. Seeing this, Andy cut one of his legs and passed through Gina's attack. While heading towards Gina, Andy explained that there was a small hole under her foot, and if he could get into that hole, he could use the misfortune he had accumulated so far. Andy then entered the water, followed by Gina's large hands. Andy threw his sword towards her, which was blocked by her invisible shield. The sword was then thrown into the air, and Andy cut both of his hands with the sword, spraying blood toward Gina. He continued by prying open Gina's shield hole, and Fuko threw Andy's head into Gina's shield, pushing it out of the floating lake. Since Andy was inside Gina's shield, the misfortune that would kill him followed. And because Gina's shield was composed of air, light could easily pass through it. The UFO above them then fired a laser beam at Gina and Andy, causing a massive shockwave. Fuko, witnessing the event, worried about Andy, but the platform she was standing on suddenly collapsed and she fell into the lake. Fuko, who managed to reach the lake's edge, then wondered about Gina's condition and ran towards where the UFO laser's mark was. Under the full moon, Andy sat beside Gina, who was coughing. Andy then bit his finger and prepared to shoot it at Gina, who was lying helpless in front of him. Fuko tried to stop him. Andy then stopped his action and said that he chose not to make her suffer. Fuko tried to oppose him, but Gina smiled slightly and said that hadn't Fuko already prepared for the worst when she entered the battle. Jenna then said she wanted to change because she had captured and executed so many living beings while in the Union, but none of them changed. She believed that her mission was to prevent change in the world. Then she remembered the painting Foucault had drawn and praised the artwork. She realized that she hadn't changed, but maybe change wasn't too bad. While crying, she asked Foucault and Andy to leave. As Jenna was talking, Andy lifted her body and held her hand. Jenna felt embarrassed about her condition, but Andy reassured her. Then Gina placed both her hands behind Andy's neck and kissed him.